Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion, which is about humility and the emotionally intelligent leader. As we discussed previously, humility is a rich and complex virtue. There are many aspects of humility that are worth considering, and there are many ways that humility can promote good leadership. In today's discussion, I'd like to focus on only one of the leadership skills tied to humility, which is called emotional intelligence, also known as EQ, as opposed to IQ. Emotional intelligence is an idea that has become central to current leadership discussions. And that's because recent research has shown how powerful EQ can be to produce good leadership results and how deadly its absence can be for the work of a leader. Some authors are concluding that when it comes to leadership, EQ is even more important than IQ. We'll also see that emotional intelligence is linked to St. Augustine's foundational understanding of humility as a habit where the center of our focus is on others rather than yourself. After that, we'll add in other aspects of humility that may be more familiar, things like not being proud and thinking you're better than others, as well as the ability to recognize your own weaknesses, which leads to a desire to change your behavior. So I'd like to start with two stories. The first I read in a book called Primal Leadership, which is an in-depth description of the importance of emotional intelligence to leadership. The authors begin the book with a story from the British Broadcasting Company. At one point, the BBC stood up a new division and assigned 200 reporters and journalists to it. After 2 years, the organization failed to achieve its goals, and the BBC decided to shut it down, which would lay off many of the people that had originally been assigned to the division. They called a meeting of the division to share the unwelcome news, and the senior leader that delivered the message began by relating how good things were in other areas of the company and in his own life. He had just had a great trip to Cannes, France. He then quickly transitions to the fact that the division was closing down and that most everyone in the room would be losing their job. He almost had to be escorted out of the room by security due to the angry response of the employees. The next day, the division was again called together and addressed with the same message by a second executive. This time, the executive talked about journalism as a noble calling that was intrinsically valuable to a society. He noted that it was also a risky career. There's not a lot of job security, and that everyone in the room were passionate and devoted professionals. He wished them all the best in the future, and the group literally greeted him with applause rather than hostility. It seems too ridiculous to be true. A seasoned executive should not be that dumb, right? And I might agree with that if I had not been a party to the same exact situation. At one point in my career, a senior leader I worked for got on a conference call to address the performance of my department, which was struggling to meet its goals. Trying to be the tough leader, he told us that we were all failing and that hard work and overtime was authorized. He then went on to say that he was leaving early on Friday and looking forward to having a relaxing weekend with his family. It took 6 months for our morale to recover from that phone call. What the authors of Primal Leadership and my own experience are pointing out is the crucial importance of a leader's ability to perceive the emotions of others and to be able to adjust to those emotions to have the most positive effect possible. That is emotional intelligence. It is the ability not only to recognize the emotions of others, but also to recognize the impact you as the leader are having on those emotions, and then adjust your behavior to have the best impact possible. Humility as a focus on others rather than oneself is the moral habit that enables a leader to perfect this skill. It is hard to overemphasize the importance of emotional intelligence. And it's clear that many leaders struggle with this skill, which is likely the result of a lack of humility on the part of many leaders. So let's talk about the skill and its relationship to humility in a little more depth. Emotionally intelligent leaders are able to focus on their audience, which is their team of followers. And humility is the virtue that enables them to do this. St. Augustine tells us that humility is the opposite of pride or self-love. So humility, therefore, points our attention away from self and toward others. On the basis of humility, leaders can be good observers and listeners, so they can figure out how their followers are feeling. Sometimes those feelings are obvious because people will tell leaders how they're feeling. But many times leaders need to look for other indicators of their subordinates' emotions. Followers often think it's not in their interest to communicate their unhappiness to supervisors, and they think this for a good reason. People, especially leaders, do not like to work with complainers, so subordinates must pick and choose when and where to provide negative feedback. If leaders are depending only on times when followers are willing to speak up about a problem, they will miss many of the factors that are weighing their team down. So the good news is followers, being the human and biological creatures that they are, will often tip off how they feel through body language and other nonverbal cues. The humble and EQ-savvy leader is adept at spotting these cues, and they're really not that hard to observe. Crossed arms, detached staring, checking a watch, grimacing, looking out the window, and a washboard forehead are some of the not-so-subtle signs that your message is not being well received. Leaders need to be observant and concerned about their followers first and themselves second. They need to be looking at their followers while they are communicating with them to see how that communication is landing. Leaders need to be students of people. And it's good to hone your people observation skills on others who are not your followers. Observing friends, family, and peers can do the trick. That practice will pay dividends in your ability to read the reaction of your followers in response to your communication. There are also habits that hamper a leader's ability to read the emotions of his people, and they include arrogance and defensiveness. It is easy to see how arrogance is opposed to humility. Arrogant people think highly of themselves and look down on others, while humble people are simply not self-focused. Arrogant people alienate others, which often causes other people to hide their feelings from the proud leader, which will add to the self-focused leader's inability to understand his followers. St. Augustine tells us that arrogance is the parent of envy, and envy inhibits authentic and transparent relationships. Defensiveness is also a function of self-focus. The defensive leader is worried about justifying his own actions rather than observing the behavior of others. If leaders are often defensive, followers will be less likely to offer feedback because they know any kind of critical feedback may lead to contentious interactions. This may come as a shock, but people, and followers in particular, are not eager to engage in conflicts with their supervisors, especially ones that they can avoid. So defensive leaders will go without much of the data necessary to guide productive interactions with their followers. A last key to emotional intelligence that is supported by humility is the humble leader's ability to change his behavior on the basis of his observations. Recent psychological research has shown that the virtue of humility enables a person to be teachable. Humble people are aware of their weaknesses, which encourages them to look for better ways of doing things. Humble leaders that see their behaviors not supporting positive emotions on the part of their followers have a capacity and an inclination to change that behavior because of their humility. Without an ability to recognize failures and mistakes, a leader will never pursue the work necessary to change tack and engage followers in ways that produce positive emotions. And it is positive emotions that lead to positive team results. And that is the goal of any leader.